Who wants a pot of coffee? I just make coffee. You want a cup of coffee? Sure, there you go. Who wants coffee? Anybody else want coffee? Who wants coffee?
And now it's time for the man with the caffeine, the new tropics for the brain. It's Coffee with Mike. Hang in, hang tight, grab your cup, and let's get this thing started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Java Chat. We got an interesting one for you today. It almost sounds like, what's his name? Steve Harvey. We got a good one for you today. We have a gentleman here by the name of Kenny Polcari, who's a former Wall Street floor trader. Now, if you guys don't, everybody thinks about Wall Street as just, this big, crazy, wild place. And that's exactly where Kenny played in the days when it was like that. In fact, if any of you even remember the movie Trading Places, which is one of my absolute favorites when it comes to Wall Street, I thought that was well done. Yeah. I'm sure Kenny's got a few stories that can relate to something just like that. So, Kenny, thanks for coming on and hanging out with us at Java Chat.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. Although, that movie took place, that was in the commodities markets.
Oh, okay.
Although the theory is the same, because the markets, the floor of the New York Stock Exchange was a market.
Yeah.
We traded equities there, right?
Yeah. And we're going to get into that. Yeah. Give us a little bit of history about where you're from. Because you're not there now. You're in Florida now, from what I remember. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, but you're originally a
Bostonian. I was a kid. I was born and brought up in a town outside of Boston called Belmont. The middle of 5 kids from a Boston Italian family. And
oh my gosh,
my grandparents came over. After the First World War.
Wow.
Moved to Boston, met each other in Boston. All that stuff. And then I was born in Boston in 1961. I lived there until I graduated college, which was 1983. I went to Boston University School of Management.
Nice.
And during the summers of my college experience, I had the opportunity to go work on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Now, after
how the hell does that happen? You're in college and you get to go to the floor?
It's very interesting. I was 19 years old. I had never
and
been
at 19.
Hello. Yeah, I had never been to New York City before. It was December of 1979.
Wow.
Because I was just finished the first semester of my freshman year in college.
Right.
And we went to New York. My family and I went to New York. My dad was a retail stockbroker in Boston.
Oh, wow.
But had relationships with people in New York. And so we had been invited to New York as a family to go to a Christmas party in New York City. This person he knew and who ultimately became partners with, lived in New York City, had this great Christmas party. And so we went to the Christmas party, and I was 19 years old. And there I met a bunch of people, and a lot of them were guys from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange who were very, very, they were all type A personalities. They were funny. They were the greatest set of guys that you could imagine. I mean, they would just think about a type A personality, just constantly going, right?
Oh,
poking at each other.
Oh, yeah.
And so I ended up having, we had a great time at this party, met a number of people, and had a couple of conversations. And this one guy said to me, why don't you consider coming to New York for the summer and work on the floor of New York Stock Exchange? Okay, dude, look, I'm 19 years old at the time. And I'm sitting there going, what the hell do I want to move to New York City for in the summer when I had every intention of going back to Cape Cod and, being a lifeguard on the beach at 19 years old? Could you think of anything else you'd rather do?
That's the best job. Are you kidding me? Lifeguard? Come on.
Well, and so my first reaction was to say no, that I had no interest in doing that. I didn't, what the hell would I want to do? So I went back to college my second semester freshman year, and I started thinking about this opportunity. And I thought, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to go there. I'm going to have this experience. I'm either going to like it. I'm either going to like it or I'm not going to like it. So if I don't like it, I chalk it up for experience. And if I do like it, who knows, it could change the course of my life.
Right.
Well, clearly it changed the course of my life, because what I decided to do was I said, what, screw it. I'm going to go. I'm going to live in New York for the summer. I'm going to try it out. So I moved to New York City in the summer of 1980, downtown in the financial district, which was a ghost town.
Yeah.
after 5 o'clock at night, because it was really where all the banks and brokers were, right?
That's
No
right.
one lived downtown.
Nope.
But
Yep.
the rent was cheap, and it was right around the corner from the exchange, and I could walk back and forth. And so, okay, let's do it. Well, I walked on the floor on it was probably May 10th or 12th of 1980, not knowing anything about anything. And it took me about 3 weeks, and all of a sudden I was just enamored with the place. I understood. I still didn't understand a thing that was going on, because there was a separate language. Everybody spoke in a different language.
Oh, I bet.
It's like they spoke in fractions, they spoke in symbols, they spoke in the way if you came from the business, the way you represented yourself as a buyer, the way you represented yourself as a seller,
Yep.
supply and demand, and understanding how to read the crowd, right? That was really important.
That right there.
How
Reading
to
the crowd.
read the crowd.
That has got to be one of the most underappreciated skills to
and
this day.
And until you learn that skill, and it's not a skill you learn anywhere. You don't learn it in college. You don't learn it by going to school. You have to learn it by doing it. And what was really interesting is, in 1980, my generation was the first generation of guys that were going, men and women. I say guys in a general sense.
Yeah.
That were going to the floor, that actually were going to college. Everyone that was above me, that was older than me, these were kids that had come from the streets of New York, Brooklyn, and Queens, and Staten Island, and Manhattan. Yeah. They didn't go to college. They came right out of high school. But again, they were type A. They were street smart. They could read a crowd.
Yeah.
They understood what it was like when you got in a crowd, supply and demand, when they were, how the buyers were, how aggressive were the sellers, how to strategize and be creative in terms of representing clients at the point of sale. It was the most amazing place in the whole world. And I was there for about 3 weeks, and I was like, oh my God, I couldn't get enough of the place, right?
Yeah.
I'd run home after work, I'd read the newspaper, I'd read books, I'd try to learn everything I could. So the next morning I'd get up and I'd fly right to work again. And listen, that first summer I was a gopher, right? I mean, you go for this, you go for that, you don't do anything, but because I didn't know anything, right? But I spent the whole summer learning. Back to college in the summer. I went back to college in September 1980. I came back in the summer of 81. I did the same thing. I got a little bit better at it. I got to know more people. I got to understand it. It was unbelievable. And then I went back in September of 81. I came back in the summer of 82. Here's what's really interesting for a lot of your listeners who may or may not understand this, because if you weren't around in 1982, you definitely won't understand it. We had just come through the Jimmy Carter years.
Yep.
You remember the whole Iranian hostage crisis.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. economy was in complete.
It was rough.
Dislocation.
It was rough.
Interest rates were 21%. Unemployment was 13%. Inflation was running at 10%. It was a really difficult time in the country. And then on top of it, we had, we were still morally demoralized after the Iranian hostage crisis thing and the Jimmy Carter. Ronald Reagan had just become president. Paul Volcker was Fed chair. Ronald Reagan was now pushing through, his tax reform policy, very much the way what happened when Trump took office, right? The whole tax reform policy. And if you remember, that was a massive legislative deal. The Reagan tax
it was
package,
insane,
right? Yeah,
it was insane.
But what was interesting is that guys who were my age then, who were 59, 60 years old back in 1982, when business was so bad, they were losing their jobs, they were losing their business, guys were getting thrown out because business was horrendous.
Yeah.
So I came back in the summer of 1982, went to go work for the guy that I had worked for the previous 2 summers. Now, he was a guy who was an independent member on the floor. He had what I thought was a fairly decent business, but started to suffer because think about this for a minute. When interest rates are 21% and you were anybody who had any money in the world, you had 2 choices with your money. You could go to the bank and put it in a CD in the bank and earn 21% guaranteed, no risk, sleep at night.
Right.
Or you could take your money and you could go out and buy GE and Johnson & Johnson and General Electric. And they're all fine American companies, but they're full of risk, right?
Yeah.
And so you had a choice. Geez, I could take this, whatever the number is, the $500,000, $1 million, $2 million. I could take it and go to the bank and earn 21%, or I could buy these stocks and risk never knowing, right? Because stocks go up and down in value. The economy was horrendous. It was horrendous. And so all this money flew into the banks, right? And so the Dow was trading at 792. Today it's trading at 28,000.
Yeah, no. What a did we ever think?
Volume on the New York Stock Exchange was maybe 30 million shares a day. Today we'll do 30 million shares in about a minute and a half.
Yeah.
But I went back in the summer of 1982, and I'll never forget it, because the guy that I was going back to work for, literally, I walked in there, he put his arm around me, and he said to me, I can't afford to have you. Like, I just can't afford to have you.
Wow.
His business was going down the drain. Now, listen, 1982, I was making $125 a week as an intern on the floor of the exchange. $125 a week, right? And so this guy said to me, it's just another bill I can't afford to have right now.
Right.
I said, all right. So I thought, okay, maybe this is the summer I'm going to be the lifeguard at the beach. Right? So then I decided,
hey, you had something to fall back on.
Yeah. So I walked around, because by this time I gotten to know a lot of guys on the floor and businesses and stuff. So I walked around. I said, okay, let me just check it out. So this one particular gentleman who I absolutely adore. He is the salt of the earth. I went over to him. Hey, Mr. Latham, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. And, hey, welcome back, kid. You puts his arm around you, gives you the old, how do you do? And I said to him, I said, Mr. Latham, I said, I'm probably not going to be sticking around. I said, because Dougie can't have me. His business is not doing very well. So I'm looking for a job, but I also understand that times are tough. And he looked at me and he goes, hey, kid, do you know the difference between a buy and a sell? I go, yeah. He goes, do you know the difference between 1/8 and 1/4? I go, yes, sir. He goes, what's the symbol for IBM? It's IBM, right?
Yeah, right.
So he said, can you start tomorrow? How's $250 a week? $250? I just got a raise.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I couldn't believe it. And so I spent the summer 1982. And what's really significant about this is what happened in the summer 1982. And again, if you weren't around, you won't understand this, but it was Monday, August 16th. The Dow was trading at 792. Like I said, interest rates were 21%, inflation was 13%, unemployment was 10%. It was horrendous. And on the Monday afternoon, there was this rumor that was starting that on Tuesday morning there was going to be this surprise announcement by the Fed. The Fed never made surprise announcements. Never, ever, ever. Right?
Yeah.
They came out on Thursday
they're always
mornings,
predictable. Yeah.
Thursday morning at 8:30, the guy, he'd open the door, he'd step out to the podium, he'd make an announcement, he'd turn around, he'd close the door. He didn't sit there and hold your hand and offer you a Xanax and say, can we talk about it? Lie down. Are you okay? How do you feel? None of that shit, right? So now remember, also, there was no internet, there's no LinkedIn, there's no Twitter, there's no Facebook, there's no television, there's radio on the floor. Yep. So the only way when you were on the floor, the only way you got information was when somebody from the outside called down to tell you what was happening, right? Right. And that was by design, because when you were on the floor of the exchange and you were representing a client in a crowd, you were not supposed to be poisoned with news from the outside. Your job was to react to supply and demand at that moment in time. Yep. To be able to represent, buy and sell the stock based on what was happening at that moment in time in that stock. Okay, so rumor has it that the Fed's going to come out on Tuesday, and so nobody really paid any attention to it. So Tuesday morning came, we're all there at work. It's as the clock approached 8:30, you could feel this kind of like the rooms got quiet. Now at this time there were 3 rooms at the New York Stock Exchange: the original room, which is the room you see on TV all the time, and then there was the first one that was built in 1917 called the Garage, and the other one built in 1963 called the Blue Room. The 3 rooms made up the trading floor. Okay. And all the stocks that traded amongst those 3 rooms. So as we approached about 8:30, you could feel the room get a little bit quiet, but not because everyone's just waiting. Yeah. And the only way you were going to know if something happened is if the phone started ringing, because again, there was no television, there was no radio, there was no internet, right? Right. All of a sudden, it's about 8:30 and 30 seconds. And every single phone on the floor lit up, and they were these old institutional metal phones with the push buttons, and they would ring like ring. They would ring, right? Not play songs and music the way they do today. They would ring like ring. Every phone lit up at the same time, and you picked up the phone, and the people on the outside were guys that were on trading desks at Goldman Sachs, and J.P. Morgan, and Morgan Stanley, and First Boston, right, and other regional brokers and all that stuff. And people screaming through the phone, "Oh my God! Did you see what happened?" You said, "No, I didn't see what happened. What happened?" And so what he told you, in fact, the Fed had come out, and they made this surprise announcement on Tuesday morning, August 17th. And they made the announcement that they were going to break the back of inflation, break the back of unemployment. They were going to cut interest rates by 10%. Listen to what I just said, 10%. That was 10% a big deal. Is 2%, 2 full percentage points. Yeah. Right. So rates are going to go from 21 to 19% in one fell swoop. Today, we're talking about raising rates by 1/4%. Everyone's having a nervous breakdown. Right. Yeah. Right. And so that was Tuesday, August 17th, was the birth of the greatest bull market that you and I and the world has ever known. Yep. Right. And so And so on that day, the phones didn't stop ringing, because what that did was it drew a line in the sand, and he made it very clear that rates were coming down. And so what did it do? It forced money out of the banks
Back
and
into the market.
stocks, right?
Yep.
And the market took off. And that day we traded. Now on Monday we traded 30 million shares, and the Dow might have been up or down 50 cents.
Yeah.
You know, 75 cents.
Yeah.
A buck, maybe a buck, right? Tuesday, we traded 138 million shares, and the market was up 4.5%. 4.5% at the time was 35 points.
Jeez.
Today, 35 points is nothing, but then it was the percentage move.
Oh, yeah.
It was a massive move in the market, right?
Sure.
And the phones never stopped ringing. It was the most amazing day. I remember it like it was yesterday, right? And that was the birth of the greatest bull market. And then so I stayed through August. I went back to college in September. It was my senior year in college, and he didn't want me to go back. He now wanted me to stay there. I go, look, dude, I've gone 3 years of college. I spent $30,000, $10,000 a year at Boston University is what it cost me at the time. Today it costs $70,000 a year.
That's
right?
insane.
So, insane. So I went back to college. He said, okay, go back. He said, but you have a job when you get out in May, the following May. Look, dude, I just hit the friggin' lottery because there were kids who couldn't get a job. And I had a job 9 months out.
Yep.
He was going to hold it for me. I had it. I was going to pay me $36,000 a year. I hit the lottery. Right?
Boy, did you.
And so I went back to college. I had the greatest senior year of my life because everyone else is, doing their resumes and going on interviews. And I didn't do any of that, which actually probably in retrospect might have been a mistake. But you know what? I knew what I wanted to do, and I just went and did it, right? So I finished my senior year. I went to Italy for a month in June. I moved down to New York in early July of 1983 for what I thought was going to be a 2 or 3 year stint. Yeah. Look, like I said to you, I'm a kid from Boston. My whole family lives in Boston.
Yep.
And if you know anything about Italian mothers want, their kids around them, right? Yep. So I was expected to get married and buy a house next door, basically to my mother and father, and live there like everyone was, right? Yep. That's just the way it was, right?
Yep.
So I moved to New York and went to work on the floor of the exchange. It was this amazing place. I ended up meeting my wife on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
Really?
Who at the time, it's another interesting story. My wife was a young girl from Brooklyn. She's actually Puerto Rican. She was born in Puerto Rico. She moved in when she was 3. She went to high school. After high school, she got a job on the floor, did not go to college, got a job on the floor as a runner, and worked her way up the scale on her own and became a member of the New York Stock Exchange in 1984 when there were 12 female members of the exchange out of 1,366. When women were just punching their head through the glass ceiling, my wife was one of those on the cutting edge of those women that were pushing.
That's awesome.
And on top of that, she's Puerto Rican, so she's Hispanic. She's a minority, which just added.
She's one of the street smarts.
Yeah. She was certainly one of the trailblazers. And anyway, so I met my wife there. Next thing you know, we got married. Then you buy a house, then you get pregnant, you have kids, and all of a sudden you get 2 cars and a dog, and next thing you know, your life just happens, right? So 38 years later, I was still in New York, and I never ended up moving back to Boston. And my mother's still not talking to me, but that's a whole other issue, right? But I have to tell you, it was the most amazing place and time to be. And, I was young, it was exciting. The market was just on fire. And
how many years did you spend there?
38. I was there
38 years.
I left there in January of 2019.
Wow. So you just left.
I left. Yeah. I left a year and a half ago.
So you've seen a ton of change on that floor.
A ton of change, the rules and regulations, the events, things like the crash of 87, the bull market of the 90s, the whole Y2K tech bubble and what was
that was a joke. I laughed so hard at that. I mean, the fear was real. The caution was real, but
the fear was real
when they finally figured out what the real issue was.
Right. The fear was real, but that whole time, the 90s was just an incredible time.
Yes, it was.
In the markets, not only just in terms of the markets, but in terms of technology was just beginning to show its face. Europe and Asia had already they had gone from open cry markets the way we were to automated, right? They had automated their markets in the late 80s and early 90s. The United States, we were still doing pen to paper, human to human, eighths of a dollar trading in the crowd, right? We did not automate until after the turn of the century.
Yeah.
And so,
So what are you saying, that the floor trader is a dying breed?
Well, there is no more floor trader now. If you
Really?
look now, yeah, they're all gone. There's no, it's all automated. Today, it's all automated.
So who are those people walking around down there?
Well, so there's, first of all those people, there's less than 200, down from 5,500 is what used to be on the trading floor every day.
Wow. That's
5,500 type A personalities, which that was the greatest part, because we were all type A personalities. And so,
boy, that had to be a spectacle.
Dude, I got to tell you, the energy was up here every day. If the market was up, the energy was up. If the market was down, the energy was up. It was just a different energy.
Yeah.
You could feel it. You know, like I like to explain it. You know, when you go to a concert, like a concert, and you're sitting right down in the front, and you know the big, huge speakers, and when the music starts to play,
just vibing on you.
You know, if you're standing in front of the speaker, you can feel the vibration. It goes right through your body, right?
Yep.
That's the way it felt every single day on the floor. It was the most exciting place in the world. And
That's
then, you know,
amazing.
I was there during the crash in 1987. I was only 26 years old, but that's also a story that, like, I remember it was yesterday.
You were there during 08 too.
I was there during 08. I was there during 9/11. I was there during Y2K. I was there the whole way through it.
Goodness gracious.
Right? And each one of those events resulted in, you know, regulatory changes and advancements in technology. And so slowly the market started to change, because it didn't change overnight until after 9/11. I will say after 9/11, it started to change overnight, because what people don't realize about 9/11 was what it revealed. And what it revealed was the vulnerability of the United States and the U.S. capital markets, because here we had
so much sitting in those towers. I mean,
well,
whole floors worth of financial planning.
Yeah. Not only in the towers, but what people don't understand is that the New York Stock Exchange was 3 blocks east of the Twin Towers. And at the turn of the century, once we converted from open outcry to starting to use technology and really automating the marketplace, all the servers that ran the floor of the New York Stock Exchange that were all located in the building, all the cables and wires that ran out to the world, that connected out to the brokers, went underneath went through the belly of the trade centers. Now, I don't think anybody, do I think that they knew, Al-Qaeda knew that was the case? No, I don't think Al-Qaeda knew that at all.
No,
but what happened was that's where they went. And when the trade centers got hit and collapsed, what happened to all those cables and wires? They all got severed and destroyed. And so now what happens to this brand new automated 21st century market we have? It was gone. It doesn't work. Right? I mean, the building physically was there, and you could turn the computers on, but there's no data.
Yeah.
There's no data going back and forth, because now there's no connectivity. And so what happened was that event revealed exactly how vulnerable the country was and how vulnerable the markets were. Because look, the listed stocks, when you think of IBM and General Electric and Abbott Laboratories and Boeing, those are all New York Stock Exchange listed stocks.
Yep.
Unlike Apple and Intel, they traded on NASDAQ. NASDAQ was a different marketplace. You know, the office buildings were in Times Square. That was already an automated, computerized market, not like the New York Stock Exchange. It was very, very different.
Right.
And what 9/11 revealed was there was, you know, not only did we not have a backup plan in this country, but what it revealed was how vulnerable we were as a country, and how vulnerable the capital market system was. And listen, the U.S. capital markets is not just the U.S. It involves investors around the world. The same way we as Americans go invest in Europe, we as Americans go invest in Asia. And so Asians come to America, invest in the US. Europeans come to America. Latin Americans come to America. Canadians come to America, right? The same way, right?
Yep.
And so what it highlighted was the risk of our system, and our system was the New York Stock Exchange, was where it all traded. I mean, listen, they were starting to make advancements in what you call alternative trading systems, but they hadn't taken off yet. The technology wasn't so advanced that they were successful yet. But what happened was, when that happened, the whole world changed, right?
Yeah.
When we realized, when people thought, okay, well, the New York Stock Exchange is going to open on Tuesday. You're right, damn right, it was going to open on Tuesday, 9/11. But then it didn't open on Wednesday, and then it didn't open on Thursday, because it couldn't.
Right.
There was no connectivity. But no one stood up and told everybody about that, because it would have created panic, right?
Yeah.
And so here's what happened. So on Wednesday morning, you call your broker and you say to your broker, okay, I want to sell my stocks, because you remember what was going on. The whole
Everybody was trying to dump.
conversation,
Yeah.
everybody, right? And Asian markets were under pressure, European markets were under pressure, but the U.S. markets, and when the U.S. markets, when you couldn't trade anything on the New York Stock Exchange, you couldn't trade anything else. So interest rates didn't trade, futures didn't trade, currencies didn't trade, nothing traded, right? So the United States went dark, completely dark. And so what we had to do as a nation and as an industry was we shipped guys in immediately that had to rewire the system. And they, in the middle, now think about what was happening. Over here was this disaster of the World Trade Center. And over here was the center of finance for really, well, not only the United States, but really for the world, right? And these guys, they had to rewire every single computer and server on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange to the outside world. They had to connect it. They had to test it. They had to make sure that everyone in the outside world could connect in. They had to make sure we could connect out. They had to connect the phones. We had to find office space for all those brokers that were in the Twin Towers whose offices had gotten destroyed because of the towers collapsed. They had, you couldn't say to Merrill Lynch, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to open the market, but you can't play because their office got destroyed.
Yeah.
Everyone had to be up and running before you could open the market again, right?
Jeez.
And so when you think about it, it was really amazing when you think about it, because we got that up and running in 6 days, right? Because it happened on Tuesday. The following Monday, we reopened. Now, when you think about that, we put it together with spit and Band-Aids.
Oh, yeah.
No one knew if it was going to last. It wasn't going to last, right?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget on that Monday, the people who could come back to work came back. There were some people who couldn't come back because they had gotten killed. There are other people who chose not to come back because they were too traumatized. They just weren't coming back. But for those of us who did go back, we had to go back over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday. We had to test our phones, test computers to make sure everything was going to work.
Sure.
Monday morning we were going to go, right? And so on the Monday morning, they had everybody on the floor that came back. They had policemen, they had firemen, they had Hillary Clinton and Chuck Schumer, elected officials, and they had Rudy Giuliani and the mayors, all that stuff, right? And they also had this woman who's in the Army. I forget her name right now, but you can look her up. She's very famous. But she's an opera singer, and they brought her to New York and they put her up on the podium at 9:15 on the Monday morning, and she sang "God Bless America" at 9:15. Just a cappella, just sang it. Just blew the doors off the place, right?
Awesome.
And I have to tell you something. Talk about an emotional moment in your life.
Oh, yeah.
Because we all know what happened on 9/11. You remember exactly where you were.
Yep.
And then on the Monday morning, here we were, and everyone expected that the market was going to open and it was going to crash.
Yeah.
Right. Because you wanted out. You didn't want to own GE and Abbott and Johnson & Johnson, but you want your cash. You called your broker and said, "Get me the fuck out. I want my cash."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and that's exactly what happened. She sang that. There were tears in everybody's eyes. And then at 9:29 and 55 seconds, when they start to ring the opening bell, everyone on the floor goes like this. Because you didn't know if it was going to work or if it was going to fail, right? Were the computers going to, were the computers going to start delivering order flow, and was the tape going to start to move, and was stocks going to start to trade or not? And so it did. In fact, it all lit up, and the computers lit up, and the order flow started to come in, and the trade started to happen. And I'll never forget it. We ran around the whole day like on eggshells, right? Because
sure. Nobody,
at any moment you didn't know.
Yeah.
And at 4:00, when the closing bell rang, the market was down 600 points, I think, on huge volume.
Yeah.
And that was a big move. Down 600 points was a big move. But when the bell stopped ringing is when it got really emotional, because it was at that moment that you realize that as difficult as the previous 6 days had been, and as difficult as that day had been, and as difficult as it was going to be in the days ahead, that we were back. We were, they kicked us down and knocked us down for 6 days. Absolutely, they did. But it was like at 4:00, it was like you could feel the whole country stand up and lock arms and stand up, and then it became really like physically emotional, right? Crying and tears, and because people were just holding it all in. Everyone was trying to be, you know what I mean? They were trying to hold it together. Trying to hold it together.
Yeah.
And then that was the beginning of really what was soon to become like this massive change in the industry, certainly the beginning of the rebound.
Right.
And so from there, that event, what that event did was it shone a light on the vulnerabilities. It shone a light on the vulnerabilities of the country, of the market, how that affected global markets. Because look, if you're somebody in Europe, you got all this money, you've worked your whole life, you got all this money, it's invested in stocks in Europe, it's invested in stocks in the United States. When that event happens, you get freaky too.
Yeah.
And
sure.
you call your broker and you say, listen, I sell all my stocks, European, US, sell them all. I want all my money. And so the broker sells your stocks in Europe, but he says to you, I can't sell your stocks in the United States because the markets are closed. I can't sell them. And so you say, okay, that's on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, you say the same thing. And he says, I can't, the market's closed. And on Friday, you say the market's closed. And so now you start to get nervous.
Yeah.
And so on the Monday morning, when the market opens, you call your broker, you say, get me out, which is exactly what happened. And the market came under immediate pressure. And, but you know, and I remember that it's so vivid in my mind.
The mere fact that all went down, though, the fact that you guys were able to make it through Monday, and people on the other side of the phones that were calling their brokers finally hearing, okay, it's done,
speaks volumes.
Yeah, because at that point now all of a sudden it's no longer, well, we can't help you. It's like,
right,
we did our job,
right,
and
correct.
you got your liquidity.
Correct.
Don't forget to come back.
Well, and so they didn't. I mean, the markets actually stabilized. That was the worst day. That Monday was the worst day.
I do remember that.
Yeah, and then, you know, I mean, listen, it was volatile for the next couple of weeks just because there had been so much damage done to the market and really to the country's psyche, right? But what happened was then the industry immediately said, okay, how do we now fix this? How do we now prepare? And so today, as a result, and listen, it may have happened anyway, but that event lit the fire under its backside.
That was a real catalyst for sure.
Yeah, it was absolutely a catalyst. And so today we have 12 exchanges in the United States, right? So New York Stock Exchange is the only physical exchange. The other 11 exchanges are virtual. They trade in the cloud. They're run by servers located all over the country. You can't touch them. You can't feel them. You can't go visit them. There's no human beings. It's all electronic.
Yeah.
The New York is the only one where there are still people. It is electronic. But the people that you see down there today, when you see it on television, those are the people that are just overseeing the technology. The technology is doing all the work. Yeah. But the people are overseeing. In the event that there's a failure of technology, in the event that there's a news item on General Electric or Boeing, it would cause a surge in the trading volume. The human being is there to help coordinate it, right? But for the most part, it's completely automated. And which is why, you know, at some point, I decided it wasn't for me anymore, because as much as I love the industry and I'm still in the industry, I'm in a different part of it now. That role, first of all, got completely automated away. It's
technology has definitely automated a lot of stuff.
The broker does not exist today. That institutional broker. Because remember, the guy on the floor, I was an institutional broker. My clients were hedge funds, mutual funds, pension plans, foundations. I wasn't talking to you as an individual.
Right.
You were not calling me up and saying, listen, I'm going to buy 50 shares of Coke and put it in my kid's retirement account. I was talking to Fidelity. I was talking to mutual funds or hedge funds, right? The portfolio manager that was managing billions of dollars that needed to buy 1 million shares of Boeing or sell 300,000 shares of IBM or buy 5 million shares of American Telephone. Those were my clients, right?
Oh my gosh, American Telephone. I haven't heard that name in forever.
American Telephone.
Hey guys, so we're gonna take a short break, and then we're gonna come back. We're gonna talk a little bit more with Kenny about motivations, things that get him jazzed. Obviously, this is one of them, which is great. And then you're gonna have to come back and share more of these stories, because I'm hearing there's plenty of them. With every market drop and come back, it's always been. It's been interesting to me too. I mean, the mere fact that I was able to see what was going to happen in 2008, back in 2006, but anyway, so we're going to take 30 seconds. We'll be right back. And then we'll talk a little bit about what motivates. All right, guys, we're back here with Java Chat, and man, Kenny, you just got some stories, dude. I mean, there's so much, and guys, understand something. When you're in the financial district or in financial vertical, there's a whole bunch of sub niches, but this one in particular gets to see a lot of the action, and it can get to be overwhelming. One of the things that Kenny said earlier was it was fun to watch a whole bunch of type A personalities playing with each other on the floor because they're sitting there trying to figure out, what am I going to buy? What am I going to sell? And the energy is, it's like a buzz. There's this buzz vibe that goes.
It's a constant buzz.
It's a constant buzz. When you talk about motivations, which we do, what moves somebody to do something, motivate, inspirate, however you want to call it. There's a reason that people got up in the morning, and yours obviously was this love of this industry. But what was that? Are there people that inspired you because of this, or was it just what moves you?
You know, it's so funny because when I was in high school getting ready to go to college, I wanted to go to school and become a lawyer and be a politician and one day, you know, be president of the United States.
There you go.
I am so happy that I am not a lawyer and a politician and president of the United States. Trust me. But it's funny because the job I ended up doing was the furthest thing in the world that I ever thought I would do.
Right.
And it goes back to that statement that I met these guys at this Christmas party. I had this opportunity. I originally said no, and then I rethought it, and and so I guess the question is, it depends on the choices you make along the way in your life, how your life is going to end up, right? And so, had I never gone to that Christmas party, I would never have had that opportunity. Had I never met that guy, I would never had that opportunity. Had I not,
you might actually be president of the United States.
I might be president of the United States. But I didn't, for whatever reason, you know, the choices I made. And then, like I said to myself, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to go there and I'm either going to love it or I'm going to hate it. If I hate it, I chalk it up for experience and move on. If I love it, who knows, it could change the course of my life. And in fact, it did just that. And it was from the minute I walked on the floor, it was the people I met. It was their engaging personalities. It was the strategy and the creativity of being on the floor. It was the energy in the room. And when I have to tell you something, the energy, it was like a drug, right? It's like
I know that one.
You just feed off the energy. And it was well, in my mind, it was the most amazing place.
Humans have this wonderful,
in the business world, right?
Humans have this wonderful ability to transfer their energy to each other, either by sound or by activity. You know, sometimes, which is why humans dance and why they sing or talk or yell out to each other, like the outcrier.
Right.
Same thing happened with me. I was a musician. People know that when I was younger. And there were days when on stage, if you're a solo guitarist, it's kind of hard. You got to feed off the crowd.
Yeah.
But if you're on stage with like 4 other musicians, holy cow! All of a sudden, it's a love fest.
Do you play the guitar?
Yeah, and I know the same thing happens in financial. I know it happens as, if you remember the movie Boiler Room. I've been in places like that, and when it's rolling and it's buzzing, it really does. It buzzes well. So, who are some of your best mentors? Like, who influenced you in your development?
Well, listen, I would be remiss if I said my father was not one of the guiding lights, and
absolutely.
Certainly one of the guiding lights in my life. But along the way, there were when I was at college at BU, there were a couple of teachers in high school that made significant impacts on the way I looked at the world and the way I thought. When I was a senior in high school, I took a psychology 101 course, and the teacher in that course he changed. It was his style. It was his personality. It was the subject matter. It just changed the way I thought. And so he made a significant impact on my life in terms of how I looked at things, how I looked at myself, how I looked at the world. Right. And then when I was in college, the same thing there. There were professors along the way in college, different classes. Certainly in my case, they were all business classes that that just started to ignite a fire that was in me, right? And then when I had the opportunity to go to New York, I mean, certainly the guy that I ended up working for, who I told you was the salt of the earth, and I love this man. He's now 83 years old. He lives out Long Island, but he was and continues to be, you know, he was a mentor then. And he was a kid that grew up in Queens, had nothing more than a high school education, worked his way up the ladder. He was a guy that, you know, at 15 years old, whose father passed away. And so when he graduated high school, his mother said, you know, go out and get a job.
Yep.
And he got a job at the New York Stock Exchange. And, but he had the right personality, right? It was all about the right personality. And somebody took a liking to him, and somebody took him under his wing, and somebody educated him, and somebody gave him an opportunity.
Right.
And in 1974, he bought a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. I think he paid $52,000 for the seat. $52,000 in 1974. And
it's like $500,000 now.
They don't exist anymore.
Well,
no,
yeah,
no,
but
so
the equivalence of
well,
the fee then to what it would be now. It's
well,
like about $500,000.
Well, so let me tell you, it's much more than that. So let me tell you why. Because when I became a member in 1985, seats were trading at $350,000. But there were only a limited number of seats. So seats traded up and down like stocks. If the market was good and the economy was good and the outlook was good, seats would trade up because you could make a lot of money. If the economy was bad, seats would trade down, right?
Yeah.
And so at the height, before the place went public, seats traded as high as $2 million.
Whoa.
It was just around the turn of the century, you know, 1998, 99. And when the place went public in 2005, after 9/11 and all that stuff, if you owned a seat, the seat became worth $6.8 million.
Jesus.
Right? So this guy, this mentor of mine, the guy that I worked for, who paid $54,000 for the seat in 1974 and worked it and used it his whole life and created a life and a career. In 2005, when the place went public, he turned the seat in. He got a check he got stock worth $6.2 million in the New York Stock Exchange, and he got a check for $350,000 or $400,000, whatever the difference was. And then the stock came out at $62 a share, traded up to 128 before the market crashed, and then traded all the way down to 15. Now it's trading back at 100 and something again. But he ended up selling all his stock on the way up, you know, in the 90s and the hundreds. And so he did very, very, very well for himself. And, but he was somebody who forever impacted my life. It was him as a person. It was as a mentor. He took me under his wing. He paid it forward as well. Nice. Just like the guy when he was younger who put his arm around him and paid it forward. Yep. He did the same to me. And I have now since done the same to, you know, three or four other guys.
Awesome.
Because that's what you should do.
Yeah,
right? You should always pay it. You should always pay it forward, and you should always look to be a mentor. And that's what I look. You know, part of what I like to do, and part of what I'm doing today is mentoring and education. Certainly in the financial services space. Sure. But I've now since left, and I moved to the wealth management side, to the high net worth investor space. Right. So I've gone from the institutional side to the retail side.
Right.
And I have this perspective after spending 38 years on the floor of the exchange, servicing institutional asset managers on not only how the markets work and function, but I get a very, very, very deep ingrained sense of the markets. And so I've taken that. And that's what really fires me up every day. Besides that, my family fires me up every day, right? I mean, I'm married. I got 2 kids, although I have 2 adults now. I don't have kids anymore. I have 2 adults now. But they fire me up every day, right? They are what keep me, you know, putting one foot in front of the other and getting up and go. Look, because I'm only 59. I know maybe I look a little bit older. I'm only 59, but I could live. My grandmother died at 103 and she was perfectly healthy. I could live for another 40 years.
That'd be perfect.
And so, I'm going no place at the moment, right? I'm not like people say, oh, you must be retired. I'm not retired at all because honestly, I think if I retired right now, I think I'd end up dying because
I think you'd end up losing your mind first.
Well, right.
Type A's have a hard time staying still. That's
absolutely.
Just how it is.
And that's part of the issue, right? So I got to be up. I got to be doing something. I'm constantly doing something. Maybe at a little bit of a slower pace, but I'm still doing something, right? And that's what keeps me going. And so, in addition to my kind of wealth management and chief market strategist role in this independent RIA down here in Florida, I do a lot of education stuff. I do a lot of public speaking stuff about the markets, about history of the markets, about all that stuff. And I mentor. And so and that's what kind of drives me today.
That's cool. That's all cool stuff. You've moved through, you've obviously gone from being mentored to being a mentor and being driven for all great reasons, family, other people that need your expertise, etc. What would be one guiding principle that you think people could use on the daily, like when they get out of bed? What would be something that you would say, this is what you should start with? Start with this when you first get up and go from there.
Well, you know, for me, I start with some introspection very early in the morning, right? I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I just think about the person I am. I think about who I want to be. I think about how I'm gonna make this day impact not only my life, but how am I going to impact somebody else's life in this day, and what can I do to do that? Right? I'm not a religious fanatic, but I have faith, and so therefore that's part of what guides me, right?
Awesome.
And so that's how I live my life, right? And I try to get up every day and think about, okay, what am I going to be able to do today that's going to benefit somebody? How can I help somebody else? And I spend a lot of time doing that. And I've really done that, honestly, my whole life in terms of how I live my life. There you go. I think that's your answer. That's me.
That's it. That's actually an answer that's in alignment with a lot of other people, how they think. With if I'm going to get up in the morning, I need a reason. Either I'm impacting family or I'm impacting my neighbor, somebody.
You got to impact somebody, and you've got to try to do something good in the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. Hey guys, we're going to take one more break. Yes, we're rolling along that fast. We're going to take one more 30-second break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about where Kenny is now, what he's doing, how he's impacting lives, and where we can find him. So then be back in 30 seconds. And we're back. Java Chat here doing an interview with Kenny Polcari. Kenny's been sharing some real amazing stories of the past, where he's been, where he's from, his motivations, obviously. If you guys didn't hear that part, reverse this a little bit. But he hasn't stopped. Even at where he's at now, he just hasn't stopped. He's still moving. What are you doing these days now that you've obviously left the exchange? You're done. You let your seat go.
Right.
But that stuff never leaves you. So what are you doing with it?
No, it doesn't leave you. And, partly is I left, it's interesting. It took me a long time to leave, partly because
38 years it took you to leave. That's a long time.
Yeah, it took me a long time because partly it defined who I was, right? For a certain amount of time, it defined who I was. And I had a love affair with the place. I just loved every minute of going there and being there and the excitement of it. And I ended up doing a lot of, I do television commentary too, and I would do it live from the floor of the exchange. And
nice.
So, it was all so very exciting to me. But at some point, it didn't make any more sense, right? I mean, the job I did got automated away, and at some point, it just didn't. It wasn't at that point. It didn't become fun for me anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so when our kids were big, our kids were grown now, so it wasn't like we had to stay in New York and put them in school and all that stuff. They had already done all that,
right?
And so I said to my wife, "Listen, if we're going to change, if I'm going to change my life, I'm going to launch this new business. I want a complete change. I want to see something different, right?"
Forgive me. I need a whole makeover.
Right. And so,
or the twins. I need a whole new ensemble.
Yeah. So we picked up and we moved to South Florida, right? We didn't own anything here. And so we just went out in a whim, and we sold our house in New York, and we picked up and we rented a place in Palm Beach to try it out, to kind of feel it out, see what it was like. And I launched my new business down here in Boca. And I have my own consulting business, which is Case Capital Advisors. And I consult not only in the financial services space, but in the wealth management space. I'm the chief market strategist for a $1.2 billion independent RIA down here in Jupiter.
Nice.
So I represent them when I get on TV. I represent them at client events. I help to bring assets and help people that now need some
sure.
More specific money management help and financial plans and all that. So I do all that, which I also, that's the other side of it that I love to do because it keeps me once again engaged with people.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
What happened in my job is it got completely automated away. They took the people away.
Yeah.
Now what this does is it allows me to sit down and have a conversation with you. It allows me to strategize. It allows me to help you build a plan and lay it out. And what do you want to do? And how are we going to get there? It's so much more creative. And for me, it fits my personality because it puts me right back in the thick of it again.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And then I still do the television stuff. I write a daily blog, a market commentary blog that you can see. It goes on my Twitter. It goes on my LinkedIn every day. You can sign up for it and get it delivered to you every day. It's
Yep, we'll have those links down in the comments.
Yep.
People be able to do that.
So that's what I do. So I've kind of created this new world for myself, different from what I did, but yet using all the skill sets that I developed over 38 years.
It's obviously serving you well if you're with a RIA that's that large. I mean, it's doing you just fine. So
yeah. No, they're great, and listen, we do a great job, and it's all very I thought, I struggled with it at first, thinking, I don't know if I can do this, but because it was the whole thing about the change, right?
Yeah.
Here I had done that other job for 38 years. I was so deep in it, is that it was the breaking out, and that's what you had to do. You had to break out. Right?
Yeah. I get that.
You had to step outside the box, and for a lot of people, that can be unnerving. And listen, I'll be the first one to say it was unnerving for me as well.
Right.
Because I was leaving everything I knew, and I was launching this new business that I didn't know, was it going to work? It wasn't going to work. And so it's still very much in the building phase. But that's exciting for me too, because I'm building it, right? So I'm actively involved. I'm doing it. I'm out there talking to people and trying to build the business. So,
and who are the kinds of people that you usually talk with? Like, are we talking net worth individuals? Are we talking just anybody or?
No. So for me, a key client is going to be someone that's got, 750,000 or more of investable assets. But most of my clients are somewhere between the 1 and 5 million mark of investable assets. The firm does, we have clients at the firm that have 10 and 15 and $20 million of investable assets. But my sweet spot is right in there, really between the 1 and 5 million, 1 and 3 million range is what my sweet spot would be. So yeah, consider that a high net worth individual.
Yeah, sure,
right?
For sure. Cool. There is a podcast that you're going to be kicking off here shortly too. What's that called?
Well, I haven't come up with the exact name yet. I think it's going to be called Host of the Party because it's going to be about finance and food.
Finance wait. Right. Finance and food.
Right. And
two completely divergent subjects. You got to explain this.
And there is a story behind that.
Okay.
And because, listen, I started this podcast by telling you I'm the middle of 5 kids from a Boston Italian family. So I grew up cooking. Well, I grew up a spatula in one hand and a pot in the other. It's just what we did in my house, right?
Yeah.
And so I grew up cooking, and I love to cook. It's fascinating. It's
you got another foodie too, right here.
Right. And so, and the thing about cooking and and as a result of cooking, I love to entertain, right?
Sure,
I love to have people. And listen, as you know, there's something very intimate about inviting someone into your home, right? You invite people into your home, you cook for them, you set the table, you create the atmosphere. There's an intimacy about that is just fascinating to me.
Oh yeah.
And my wife is the same way. My wife is Puerto Rican, and she's a great Hispanic, Spanish cook, Latin cook, and then together I cook Italian, she cooks Hispanic, and then everything else we just cook together. But my wife is also loves food and loves the entertaining and and the intimacy of it. And so what happened was, and the reason that this is, you'll understand this in a minute. If you go and you read my blog every day, you're going to see there's a headline on the blog, and it'll be a headline. So today it was like, stock surge, and then I gave you a recipe. So today I gave you linguine aglio olio, right? So you'll see in the headline on Twitter, on my LinkedIn. And the reason that happened was because in the middle of the crisis, I started writing this blog.
Okay.
In the middle of the financial crisis.
Yeah.
I would every morning, I'd just write my thoughts down on paper about what the market was doing and why, and what was important, what happened overnight in Europe, what was happening in Asia. And I used to send this blog out to just my clients. It was 16 people. That was it. I would just write it and then email it out.
Yeah.
And on this one Friday night, It was a Friday night in December. It was going to be a lousy, cold, rainy, snowy, shitty weekend in New York. And I had gotten my head, I'd just gotten beaten up the whole week because the European banks were falling off the edge. And the ECB was having meetings in Brussels every day.
Yeah.
That was right. And the markets were under pressure. And I went home on the Friday night, and my wife and I were empty nesters at the time because both our kids were at college. And I walked in the house and I went around and I pulled down all the shades on the first floor, and I took the phone off the hook and I said to my wife, I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. I want to go upstairs and take a shower. I want to put on my pajamas. I want to come downstairs and light a fire. I want to snuggle on the couch, watch movies, and cook. That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
Just me and her. That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
So that's what we did the whole weekend. That's what we did. And so on the Monday morning, I go to work, and I used to write this note from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd start writing the note. And so all of a sudden at 6:30, the phone rings, and the call came from a buddy of mine who was also a client who lived down in Texas, and he called me up to just shoot the breeze with me. What are you doing? How was your weekend? What did you do? So I told him exactly that story. And he says to me, what'd you make? And so I listed off the 4 or 5 things we made, and one of them was arugula pesto.
Oh,
arugula
boy.
pesto is just pesto made with arugula instead of basil. You use the garlic, you use the olive oil, the cheese, the pinoli nuts, right? You boil the pasta, you put the pesto sauce over the pasta, garlic bread, a glass of white wine. You're done. That's it. It's easy.
Yeah.
But it's really delicious.
Yeah.
Because arugula's got a little bit of a peppery flavor. So
Yes,
it's got
it does.
like a little bit of a kick to it, right?
Yeah.
Unlike
Yeah.
basil, a little bit sweeter.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I told him that story. I told him that the recipe, and he said to me, geez, he said, that sounds great. Can you send me the recipe? I go, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll just type it in the bottom of the note. Because now I'm talking to you at the same time I'm typing. So I typed the recipe in the bottom of the note. And so when I hit the send button, it went out to everybody on the list, which was, again, only 16 people. But, you know, when you have an email and you hit the send button, you go, oh, shit, you try to call it back. You can't call it back. It's gone, right? So the note that day went out to the 16 people, right? With the recipe in it.
Right.
And so I spent all day, 16 times I had to tell that story, because all day I got 16 phone calls. What the hell's this recipe in the bottom of the note? It was a mistake. It was a mistake. It was a mistake. But I told the whole story. And the response I got was just like you did. You laughed, right? You didn't say to me, oh, you're an idiot. You go, wow, that sounds good. Or I'm going to send this to my wife, or I'm going to go home and try to make it tonight.
Yeah.
Dude, it takes all of 15 minutes to make, because you boil the pasta, you blend the arugula, boom, that's it,
It's a done deal. Yeah.
And so the next day when I get to work, I'm writing the note on the Tuesday morning, and I'm thinking about the 16 conversations I had the day before about the food.
Right.
And what's interesting about finance, especially when you're in the middle of the crisis, is finance can be so unnerving to people, and managing money and jobs and income can be so unnerving. But yet food, on the other hand, is so nurturing, because you need food to survive.
Yep.
And you know, like, I have this love affair with food, and I have this love affair with cooking and serving, right? And like having you over for dinner. And
Awesome.
so the second day, on Tuesday, I said, screw it. You know what? I'm going to put another recipe in the note. And so I put another recipe in the note. Then the next day, I put another recipe in the note. So now the note goes every day with the first half is all about the markets, and the bottom half is a recipe of the day. And what ended up happening was, suddenly I was getting requests. All of a sudden, you'd call me up and you'd say, Kenny, I forward your note on to 5 of my friends. Can you do me a favor, just add them to the list? Yeah, okay. So I started adding people to the list. Next thing you know, there's 70,000 people on this email list.
Awesome.
Right?
That is
And
awesome.
it gets picked up by Bloomberg. It gets picked up by, goes out of my Twitter, goes out of my LinkedIn. But that's where the food and the finance came from. So the podcast, I'm going to combine my love of the markets with my love of food, because
Right.
there are times when, you know, I try to feature a recipe that details the tone of the market.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And there are other times I just want to talk about food at the end. Listen, I don't want it to be, it's not a food blog, or it's not a food podcast. It is
No,
really going to
but-
be a finance podcast.
But having something of that nature involved really sets a better tone, because most people only think of the droning that goes on in the finance industry.
You know, exactly. And so I've had such success with this blog as Food and Finance,
Mhm.
that I want to make the podcast the same thing. So I think it's going to be called Host of the Party, right? On
There
the
you
one
go.
hand, the party like you would have at your house with the food,
Right.
and on the other hand, the party, like when I think of the roaring 90s, what it was like on the floor every day, it felt like a party every day, felt like a party.
Right.
So I'm thinking that's going to be my name, and I'm thinking that I'm getting ready to launch it probably, I would imagine, over the next 2 or 3 weeks.
You'll have to get us the actual link and everything when it's ready
once
to
I
go.
do it, because it's not live yet. But
yeah, we'll definitely promote it on our end. We're happy to. And if anything, you've got a subscriber because that's stuff that I'm interested into. So it'll all work out. It'll all work out just fine.
Yeah. I think it'll be great.
That's awesome. Well, we've done our time, and we have we're gonna have to have you come back talk about some other stuff because this is fun. Yeah. Where else can people find you besides where's your blog located? What's the URL for that? So
the URL for my blog is kennypolcari.com.
Okay, cool. They can find the blog. They can find you. You're on LinkedIn.
I'm on LinkedIn, and my blog gets reposted to LinkedIn every day. You can see it there in my activity. Okay. On Twitter, which is just @KennyPolcari. You'll see my Twitter handle. All right. And my business website is called CaseCapitalAdvisors.com. That's the URL.
Cool. We'll make sure that that's all down in the comments, and people can find you. And man, thank you. I mean.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure. I hope it was I can't believe an hour and a half went by that fast.
Yeah, it goes by like super quick, dude. This happens a lot though, especially when you have a good story to share, and that's absolutely fine. There's plenty more that we can talk about. So doors open. Would love to have you back, especially when this new podcast comes on and we get some other stuff going. Yeah. And from guys, you know how we love to end these. It's always the same. We love every one of you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If it's the first time seeing it, make sure you hit the bell. The bell is what tells you when the next one comes on. If you're listening on any of the podcast platforms, Castbox, Stitcher, blah, 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 download us, subscribe, please. If you're on Anchor, you can support our little podcast by making a donation. It does help keep things moving. And always in the same. Just stay up, stay safe, stay healthy, and live. That's always the biggest one. And live. From both of us to all of you. Ciao for now.
Ciao.
For more information on Java Chat, visit www.javachatpodcast.com. You've been listening to Coffee with Mike on Java Chat. Tune in weekly to this podcast for the next episode. You can also download or subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. A production of Oasis Media Group, LLC. Located in Las Vegas, Nevada. Copyright 2019. All rights reserved.